Yes. So, shalom, everybody. Last week, what we have seen is the machloket of Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim. The Gemara explained that the Mishnah that claimed that when a minority or an individual is following a wrong ruling of Beit Din, when he's following them, then he does have to bring an individual chatat, even though he was a simple Jew that ate the non-kosher item only because he was following the ruling of the Sanhedrin. Still, he brings chatas. Yeah, that's the opinion of Chachamim. And the Tana of our Mishnah, which is Rabbi Yehuda, he disagrees with that, and he claims that he's exempt. Why is he exempt? The reason is not written explicitly, but he's exempt because one of two reasons. Either he's exempt because he's considered anus. Anus because what could have he done better? He followed the ruling of the Sanhedrin. It will be even a stronger argument if he was obligated to do so based on lo tasur, okay, that you must follow the ruling of your Sanhedrin. So the one that claims that he is, that the Chachamim that claim that he does have to bring individual chatas, apparently they claim either that in such a case, in retrospective, we say there was no lo tasur here because it was a false ruling. And they say that he is not considered anus. He's not considered anus. He is considered shogeg. You know, I can make mistakes for all kinds of reasons. I can eat a non-kosher item because I thought that in reality it is a kosher item because I was mistaken regarding the object. I could, maybe I thought that it's mutter and I thought it on my own. That is also a shogeg. And maybe my mistake was based on the fact that there was a ruling of Sanhedrin, a mistaken ruling of Sanhedrin that said that it's kosher, but it's all considered shogeg according to the Chachamim. And they also, of course, also disagree that there is a din of Horayot that is saying that you're excluded from the category of individual chatas because potentially had the majority done what I've done, then we would have brought a bull and not an individual chatas. Well, okay, had there been a majority, then fine, then you would have been exempt from individual chatas, but as long as the majority didn't do that, so as opposed to Rabbi Yehuda, they claim that you do bring individual chatas. That's what we've seen last week. Now I want to just finish one little pitch of case here. Look at the first Rashi. How did the Gemara, I'm reminding, how did the Gemara prove? How did the Gemara prove that Rabbi Yehuda, he is the author of our Mishnah? The Rabbi Yehuda, he is the one that holds the position, the opinion. Yeah, how did the Gemara prove that Rabbi Yehuda, he is the one that holds the position of the Mishnah that an individual who followed the false ruling of Beit Din, of Sanhedrin, is exempt from individual chatas? Yeah, there was an anonymous Braita that said that explicitly, that nefesh achat ba'asota bishgaga, that there are three exclusions from the paragraph in the Torah of individual chatas, and one of the things that are excluded, one of the categories that are excluded is an individual who followed a false ruling of Sanhedrin. But that was an anonymous Tanaic source. How did the Gemara prove that it's Rabbi Yehuda is the author of this anonymous source, and consequently also he is the author of our Mishnah, because they hold the same position that in such a case an individual is exempt from individual chatas? So because the Gemara said that's right in the beginning, the first row of Daf Gimel Amud Aleph, because we see that Rabbi Yehuda is the one that using the halachic technique, the halachic exegesis, the halachic technique of making exclusions for psukim, of learning from three words, three exclusions. Because he does that. Where do we see that he does that? And here is the proof of the Gemara. That's the beginning of Gimel Amud Aleph. Zo Torat Ha'ola, that's the Braita. Hare elu shlosha miutim. Yeah, but of course I skipped the most important line. That's the last three words of Beit Amud Bet. The Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda, here we have an explicit author to that Tanaic source. Here we're not discussing chatas, we're discussing ola, and it says the whole offering, the ola, and it says zot torat ha'olahu hi ha'ola al mokdah, zot torat ha'olah. It's right in the beginning of Chumash Vayikra, mamash the first book of Chumash Vayikra, Leviticus. Zot torat ha'olah hi ha'ola al mokdah. Zot torat ha'olah hi harei elu shlosha miutim. So you see that he is darshaning in the same technique. Zot, it comes to exclude something from the parsha of Ola. Ha'olah hi, okay. Now the Gemara here is short because it's not the topic of the Gemara, and it doesn't explain what are these three exclusions regarding Ola that Rabbi Yehuda learns from these wordings. So let's see now the Rashi. The first Rashi on Gimel Amud Aleph. That's why we have Rashi for. Rashi will explain us. Zot Torah, Zot Torah Ha'olah hi ha'olah, Zot hi ha'olah, Zot hi ha'olah, Harei elu shlosha mi'utei. So you see here, first of all, Rashi explains the three mi'utim. Zot torat ha'olah hi, so that's one. Hi ha'olah. You have zot torat ha'olah, that's one exclusion. Hi ha'olah, zot hi, zot, and hi ha'olah. You have three. Zot, hi ha'olah, and hi. Two he's and one zot. Harei elu, you have three exclusions. Chad prat l'nishchata b'layla. Okay, one comes to say that if the ola offering was shechted at night, then you don't accept it. So that's an exclusion. V'chad prat l'nishpach dama, and one excludes when its blood was spilled mistakenly. Then again, it's disqualified from ola. V'chad, and the third one, pratli yitziyat dama chutz l'kalaim, meaning if the blood was not spilled, but if the blood was taken out of the kodesh. Shim altal gabei mizbeach tered. In all these three cases, that it was either was shechted at night, or the blood was spilled, or blood was taken out of the place, then even if you have already the animal on the altar, you should take it down. Meaning, we know that an ola is a wholesome offering. You really need to leave it so it will all be burnt out. These three exclusions, Rabbi Yehuda learns from the words zot, he, and he. He learns three miutim, just like he does, that the Gemara claims regarding chatas, that it excludes two people that did the sin together, two people that did one half and one half, and then someone that followed a false ruling of Beidin. So we have three exclusions where there is no chatas. So in a similar way, in a similar halachic drasha, halachic technique of drasha, exegesis, he learns from three words regarding the paragraph of Ola that in three cases where the blood was spilled, when it was shechted at night, or when the blood was taken out, that even if the animal was already brought on the altar and started being burned out, you should interrupt and take it off because it's a disqualified Ola. Okay, all right. I just wanted to complete that little detail. That was important for me. But we learned the flow of the Gemara, and we didn't pause to explain that. So I'm now returning to the general point, because our shir today, after we covered in the past two shiurim pretty much ground in the Gemara, we reached last week already Gimel Amud Aleph in the middle. Amash Gimel Amud Aleph in the middle, we reached. I will not read again the Gemara, of course. I will just say what we have seen. We have seen a machloket of Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim regarding the case of an individual following a false ruling of the Sanhedrin, whether he brings individual chatas or not. Rabbi Yehuda says he's exempt. Chachamim say he is obligated, he is considered shogeg. As I explained, there are all kinds of shogeg. Once you made a mistake with the item, with the identity of the item. Once you just on your own thought that it's mutter mistakenly. And one kind of mistake is that you were basing yourself on a false ruling of Beidin. Okay? So Chachamim claim that it's a shogeg and you have to bring individual chatas. Okay? That's Chachamim. And Rabbi Yehuda, who is the author of our Mishnah and of the anonymous Braita, He claims that you're exempt from chatas. Why individual chatas? Why? One of two reasons, as we said. Either he says, since there's a potential, since in such a case, potentially had the majority done exactly what you would have done, you would have been exempt from individual chatas because the bull would have been brought. So even when a bull is not brought, you're already excluded from the category of individual chatas, or we considered you anus. That's what we have seen. So that's a machloket, and of course, Chachamim disagree with either of these explanations. Then, what we've seen in Gimel Amud Aleph is that there was an attempt of the Gemarah to claim that actually the author of our Mishnah is not Rabbi Yehuda, but it's Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Meir claims that one is exempt from individual chatas if, as an individual, he followed the false ruling of Sanhedrin. And then the Gemarah dismissed that. The Gemarah said, no, I have different explanations to explain in what case Rabbi Meir said that one is exempt from individual chatas. It's not that case, yeah? And the Gemarah offered several explanations, each one of them more interesting than the other in terms of explaining a potential machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Chachamim. Maybe they're dealing with a situation where only half of the people of Israel, they made a census, a mifkad, and exactly a tie, not a majority. Half of the people of Israel followed the false ruling of Beit Din, but then some of the Dayanim of the Sanhedrin also joined. So, and if I count the Dayanim, the judges of the Sanhedrin, then I will have a majority. Is that considered a kahal, a majority, or not? Now that could be a very deep machlokas, as you understand, whether the judges of the Sanhedrin accumulate or not. I don't want to even analyze now. You could all think already on your own based on our chakiras, how you could justify either that opinion, this opinion, or that opinion, whether if we're talking about anus, okay, and perhaps they're not anusim, the judges themselves, so they wouldn't include. But if we're talking about being part of just the din of what happens when there is a public mistake, then maybe they are counted. I'm just now throwing it to the air. But and then there was a machloket regarding whether who brings the bull, Am Yisrael, the bull, Beit Din and Am Yisrael, or only Beit Din. That could also be a fundamental machloket. And other offers were there too. But again, this is already a little bit off topic. We'll deal that with the continuing weeks. These thought-provoking explanations, potential explanations to Machloket Rabbi Meir and Chachamim. We are now, this year will be dedicated to analyze the Machloket that is at the focus of our Mishnah, yeah, of the first half of our Mishnah. The Machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim, the author of our Mishnah and Chachamim, whether an individual who followed a false ruling of Beit Din, and he's not a Talmud Chacham, he's just a simple Jew. He innocently followed the ruling of Beit Din and ate a non-kosher item based on their ruling. Okay, that was Lamaisa, as we've seen, eat it. Whether he's exempt from individual chatas or not. Okay, this is our focus now. So now, in order to analyze this machlokes, both opinions, the opinion that says that one is not exempt and the opinion that says that one is exempt, I need now to share with you a screen that, of course, I will send out to you afterwards. So our first source now will naturally be our first source now will be Reb Chaim Brisker. Yeah, the same Reb Chaim that we already learned, that we will repeat it because it's an important source and that will be our point of departure. Reb Chaim is asking does a simple chakira. I'll review it. We said it already. The chakira for Reb Chaim is the following. He says, we know a din, one second. We know a din that everybody agrees with, okay? That is not in a machlokes. There is a din, yeah, there is a law, the simple law, that if Sanhedrin gives a false ruling, and the majority of Am Yisrael, the majority of the public is following that false ruling, and then the mistake is found out, then we know we have two laws here. One, that the Beit Din or the Beit Din and Am Yisrael, okay, that's a machlokes, but either only the Beit Din or the Beit Din and Am Yisrael needs to bring a bull. That is a paragraph in the Torah, a separate paragraph from individual chatas. If from the eyes of the public are the Sanhedrin, they are the eyes of the public. And hakahal, the public, did a mistake, says the Torah, and a bull should be brought for atonement, or chatas. Great. That's one din, explicit in the Torah. Then another din will, aside from the fact that the public brings a bull, does each individual still has to bring a private chatas? Here, everyone agrees that the answer is no. In such a case where the majority follow the false ruling of Beit Din, each individual is exempt from bringing individual chatas. He's patur. All of this is agreed upon. No machlokas tanaim regarding this. Here comes Reb Chaim and analyzes. He says, let's analyze the concept, the din, that in such a case, people are exempt, individuals are exempt from bringing individual chatas. What is the essence of this law, of this exemption? After all, when the public did a mistake, it is true that not only the public did a mistake, but each individual also technically did a mistake. So why won't we say that aside from bringing the bull, each individual will bring a sheep? Comes Reb Chaim and says, I can actually understand in terms of analysis of the concept, I can understand this law in one of two ways. Either I say that the bull is exempting them. Since each one of them, I'm now elaborating a little bit on Reb Chaim, I see, since this bull is a bull that comes from the public, and the public, of course, consists of individuals, so actually each individual, it's as if he brought already his individual chatas. Because the public bull that was brought was a kapara, a chatas for each individual. So why isn't each individual bringing a sheep? Because it's not necessary. Because the bull already exempt him. It's as if each individual brought an individual chatas because the bull is on behalf of each one of them. Or the alternative understanding is saying, no, that's not the right explanation. That's not the right analysis. Indeed, these two laws are totally separate conceptually, totally separate. Two separate laws were said regarding the case of a public error that was done based on following a false ruling of Beit Din. One halacha was said in the Torah that you bring a public bull, you're obligated, the public is obligated, or Beit Din are obligated to bring a public bull. That's one law. And a separate law was said in the Torah, which is learned from the Psukim. A separate law was said that when a public did a mistake based on a false ruling of Beit Din, each individual is exempt from individual chatas, not because the Korban Tzibur exempt him. No, it's just that he's excluded. The case of a public error is excluded from the paragraph of individual chatas. It's It's different in nature. It's a qualitative difference, as we explained. When a public follows a false ruling of Beit Din, and I did it as part of a tzibur that followed the false ruling of Beit Din, I can't define this case. In essence, essentially, I can't define this case as an individual mistake, and therefore I'm exempt from individual chadas. You could have said it's a kind of an onus. You could have said it's a kind of a groupthink. However you want to explain the why, okay? But these are two understandings. Now, of course, these two fundamental explanations in the nature of the exemption of individuals from individual chadas in the case where a public followed a false ruling have a direct implication regarding understanding the positions of Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim, as we explained. If I understand like the first understanding, right, that the public bull is just, you actually, in principle, individuals are obligated to bring individual chatas, in principle. But the public bull exempt them. They brought their individual chatas via the public bull. But actually, each individual, as an individual, needs your atonement, needs your a korban. Only that the bull that was brought on behalf of every one of them caused an exemption for each individual. Each individual had a portion. If this is the explanation, the first explanation of Reb Chaim, that is very compatible with the opinion of Chachamim, the ones that disagree with our Mishnah. Because when an individual followed the false ruling of Sanhedrin, that's the machloikis, right? When an individual followed the false ruling of Sanhedrin, no bull is brought. Therefore, he needs to bring individual chatas. He has no atonement. That's simple. That's very, very simple. We'll say even more than that. Rabbi Yehuda that explains that he's exempt from chatas, from individual chatas, even an individual that follows the false ruling of Sanhedrin is exempt from individual chatas. Rabbi Yehuda, he can't explain like the first understanding of Reb Chaim. Because according to that explanation, it's clear cut that it's in such a case an individual has to bring an individual chatas. He is forced to explain, like the second explanation of Reb Chaim, that the reason why individuals are exempt from an individual chatas when a majority followed the false ruling of Beit Din is not because they had their atonement by the public bull. No. It's a separate halacha that when a public follows a false ruling of Beit Din, they're considered an anus, or they're considered excluded from a category of individual chatas. So here comes Rabbi Yehuda and elaborates it a little more. Of course, Chachamim can also understand like that understanding and say only when a group does not such a thing, then I consider it as an anus, or I considered it as something that is excluded from individual chatas. Rabbi Yehuda is forced to understand, let's say, his assumptions. A, it's not that the public bull causes the exemption from each individual when a majority does. It's just that there's a separate halacha where a majority follows a false ruling of Beit Din. This is excluded from individual chatas, okay? Either because it's excluded as a group thing, or I see it as anus. And then another assumption that Chachamim could argue with that, another assumption that not only when the public does the false ruling of Beit Din, it's excluded from individual chatas, but even when only an individual did it, since potentially it could have been a case of public bull, meaning since potentially it could have been a case of a public mistake, because it was a false ruling of Sanhedrin, then even when an individual did it, it's already excluded from individual chatas, or I see it as anus. Okay? So this is the machloket Rabbi Yehuda and Chacham. Now, let's analyze some of the assumptions here. So for here, let's look Rav Lichtenstein claims that there's some proofs for the opinion that we attributed to Chacham, that we said that Rabbi Yehuda cannot fit with it, the opinion that only Chachamim can fit with, which is that the bull itself is causing the exemption from individual Chacham, meaning that in principle, in a case of a public following a false ruling, a majority following a false ruling, in principle, each individual should have brought an individual chatas. In principle, they're not excluded from that. Only the bull is their individual chatas. Yeah, so this is the first understanding of Reb Chaim that only Chachamim, the opinion of Chachamim can fit with. And as we have seen last week, I showed you in the Shakla V'Tarya of the Gemarah that the Chazon Ish disagreed with that understanding. But here Rav Lichtenstein brings some proofs, Dafka, to that understanding, that it's the bull. Actually, the bull is the individual chatas of each individual in a case that each one has a share in it. Let's look at Rav Lichtenstein's two proofs. The Rambam in Hilchos Shkalim is saying the following. Trumat alishka ma yaseba. Okay, what is Trumas alishka? Anyone wants to tell me what is Trumas alishka? What is Trumas alishka? What happens in the beginning of Adar? What happens in the beginning of Chodesh Adar? Yes.
We start collecting Machzit Shekel.
We are starting to collect Machzit Shekel. Thank you. We're collecting Machzit Shekel every year. We have an annual campaign that is starting in Rosh Chodesh Adar. V'chad v'Adar mashmin al hashkalim. It continues till when? That campaign?
I think Pesach.
Right. So that is the campaign. That's the Mishnayos of that. And what are we collecting half of a shekel for? What are we collecting it for?
Korbanot.
Right. We're collecting it for lo stam korbanot, for korbanot tzibur, for public offerings. As you know, if I'm chas v'shalom mechalel Shabbos, well, that's my own business. It's an individual mistake. I should open my my check, my how do you say, my bank. I should write a check. I should write a check or take out my credit card. It will be painful, but that will teach me a lesson to be more careful regarding violating Shabbos by mistake. I mean, I'm taking out my credit card. I'm buying a sheep, and I come to Beit HaMikdash. And I bring a chatas, but that's an individual mistake. That's my own business. However, there's a whole set of offerings that are public offerings. Every morning, the Beit HaMikdash starts with Korban Tamid. And every afternoon, the last offering is Korban Tamid Shel Bein Arbaim. Yeah, we said this morning, Keves Echad Taseh Baboker, Keves Sheni Taseh Ben Arbaim. By the way, that happens, the fact that the first offering is Tamid, the Ola, an Ola, yeah, a Tamid. And that the last offering, by the way, aside from Pesach, that is brought after the Tamid, but okay. The fact that even in Yom Kippur, every day we bring two offerings, Tamid and Tamid, these are public offerings. Where is the money taken from? Trumas Alishka, from the Shkalim, okay? That annual has to cover 365 days of Korban Tamid. Not only that, in Shabbos there's Musaf, right? We know, we finished davening a little later on Shabbos, right? Today we daven 40 minutes. Tomorrow we'll daven, well, it depends. If you daven with RX Minyan, it's an hour and 20 minutes. If you daven in the 9 o'clock minyan, then it's 2 hours. Okay, part of it is Musaf. Musaf is also a public offering. So you need, for the Tmidin and the Musafin, which are public offerings, you need that annual campaign. So now let's look at what the Rambam says in Hilchos Shkalim, Perek Daled, Halacha Aleph and Bet. Trumas Alishka. Here, I'm marking it. Trumas Alishka. Everyone sees it? Trumas
Alishka. Make it larger, Rabbi, the larger font.
What?
Can you make the font larger?
Oh, okay, sure. Thank you. Okay, Zish, I'll do it immediately. 1 second, just a little bit patiently. We're taking care of this immediately. Yeah, now we don't have paper involved, so that's really a treat. Okay, now we'll share again the screen with much larger fonts here. Look at that. Amazing. Nachon, Zish. Trumat Alishka.
Better.
Yeah, you see it? You have it?
I see.
Here. Rambam Shkalin, Perik Dalet Alach Aleph Bet. Trumas Alishka Maya Seba. Everyone has the spot?
Yeah.
Okay. Trumat Alishka Maya Seba. What are you doing with the money? Asked the Rambams. What are the tzibur doing with the money collected in the Shkalim? Lochim mimena, you buy from it, you purchase from it, the korban tamid of every day, the daily tamid, and tmidim, and the musafin, and all the public offerings. Great. Aval, look at that. Are elem davar shel tzibur, usirei avoda zara betchila govin lahem, veinan bayin mitrumas alishka. Surprise, surprise. I would have thought, here, I'll stop this, yeah. I would have thought, and maybe I made a mistake as a teacher. I should have asked you prior to reading the Rambam, but it's okay. This public bull, the bull that is brought when a majority of Am Yisrael follow the false ruling of Beidin. This bull, how do I see it? As a korban tzibur? Forget about the Rambam that we just read. Forget about the Rambam that we just read. Intuitively, how would you see it? As a korban tzibur, like korban tamid? The public bull. Why do you say no? What is this? Why do you say no?
Either Bezdin has to bring it because they made the mistake, or all individuals have to do it if they did what Bezdin said. There's some individuals who might not have followed Bezdin, so they don't have a need.
But Zish, first of all, the case is referring even when all Am Yisrael, 100% did it. Okay, even then. Wait a minute, and I want to say, and the majority, the only reason why when the majority did it is because we say rubo kechulo. We see it, that's the learning. We see it as a public. So definitely the case is a case of a public error. And Beidin also, let's say even according to the opinion that only Beidin are bringing the bull, Beidin are representing the tzibur. That's why it's called paralem davar shel tzibur. But you still claim, you claim that it's different, okay? That it's different than, let's say, korban tamid.
Right,
okay?
korban tamid, we always have every day, every morning,
right.
without fail. It's not dependent on an external event. It's
right.
something that Tzibur always does. Har Helam Davar is only when Bezdin makes a mistake and everyone follows them.
That's true, but what do I care? Excuse me for saying it. Just like in the individual level, sometimes an individual brings Ola, sometimes he brings Chatas, sometimes he brings Korban Nedava, not because a circumstance just decided to donate a Korban. And sometimes he brings an individual Chatas. The same, I would say, regarding the public. What counts is whether it's a public offering or individual offering. And I would argue that actually, when there was a public mistake that was done institutionally, because the public authority actually ruled something, and that's how it defined it as a public error. And indeed, the majority of or all the tzibur followed it. So it's a public offering. I could have argued that. Gabe, what did you want to say?
No, I guess I was going along the same line that Zishu was going, and that this is the Tamid and the Musafim, they are established Lefi Moed, Lefi Zman,
right.
And the others are maybe not. You know, you don't know if this year we're going to have something.
Okay, the distinction is correct. The distinction is definitely correct, but I find it hard to use that distinction as an argument why this will not be defined Korban Tzibur. Because I think the question whether it's Korban Tzibur or Korban Hayachin, yeah, whether it's considered an individual is not dependent on the fact whether it's a set time or it's a coincidence, but I need to analyze what is going on here, okay? And l'chora, intuitively, I would have argued that just as the Tamid is not an individual offering, it's the Klal Yisrael bringing here an offering. It represents the public as the public. I could have argued definitely that when the public as a public does a mistake, this is considered a public offering and not Korban HaShutafin. Look, we have three kinds of korbanot, of offerings, okay? One extremity is individual chatas. Another extremity, on the other hand, we have public chatas, or a public offering. That means I have a certain yeshut, entity that is called the public, okay? Then, of course, 5 people can bring an offering together. This is called Korban HaShutafin, partners offering, okay? It's not an individual offering, but it's definitely not considered a Klal Yisrael. It's not that abstract entity concept that is called the public, the Klal Yisrael, right? It's considered Korban HaShutafin. Now, the surprise that we have that we read the Rambam, and I have to tell you, the Rambam just is paskin halacha according to an opinion in the Gemarah. The Rambam, I'll share the screen again. The Rambam here just says clearly that the Par Ha'elem Davar Shel Tzibur, that bull that is brought for an public error, yeah, that bull that is brought because of public error, and also a special chatas that is brought for avodah zarah. When he means here when again the majority of Am Yisrael worship mistakenly avodah zarah. So he says betchila govin lahem. No, that's a separate campaign. It's not taken out of the campaign of the shkalim. It is a separate campaign, meaning in order to bring the public bull, we'll have now to collect. When Beit found out that they made a false ruling and corrected their ruling, and the majority of Am Yisrael followed their false ruling, now Am Yisrael needs to collect, make a special campaign, collect, and bring that bull from that money, that separate campaign. Ve'einan ba'in mitrumat alishka. It's not taken out of trumat alishka. Okay. So here, this fits, claims Rav Lichtenstein, this fits greatly with the first understanding of Reb Chaim. I remind you, what did Reb Chaim claim? Reb Chaim, at his first understanding, the one that it said that fits only with the opinion of Chachamim, claimed that in principle, each individual has to bring individual chatas. Only reason why he is exempt from individual chatas when the majority made a mistake is because the bull is his atonement. Now, in order to achieve that, you need a direct link between the individual and the bull. Now, if it would have brought from the general campaign of Trumas Alishka, then I would have seen that bull conceptually as just the bull that is brought to the abstract concept of public. Just like Tamid is a Korban Tzibur. Tamid is taken from the Shkalim, and the Musafin are taken from the Shkalim. We see it as a Korban of that abstract entity that is called Klal Yisrael. Okay? If the bull would have taken from the same campaign, I would have seen the bull as the same thing. There was here a mistake of the public as a public. The Sanhedrin represent the public as the public. And once the majority followed it, so there was a mistake of the public as the public, and the bull represents the public as the public. the individual still needs an atonement as an individual. But now, when I say that there is a separate, special campaign that I collect from each individual for that, specifically for that bull, so now I see it more as, I'll call it, Korban HaShutafin. I see it, even if it's technically not called Korban HaShutafin, I don't care, but I'm saying conceptually, there is a more direct link. If it would have taken from the general campaign of the Shkalim, then there wouldn't have been a direct link between each individual and that bull. If each individual is specifically giving now money for that bull, so now I could see it as an atonement for each individual, just like as if it's a korban hayachid of each individual. Therefore, he doesn't have to bring a sheep. Okay. Consequently, of course, in a case that only a minority did follow the false ruling of Beit Din and no bull is brought, and the individual needs to bring the sheep, like the opinion of Chachamim against the Tana of our Mishnah. So that's the first proof. Now, of course, there's one assumption here. Here, I want to give you, we assumed, and that's the understanding of most Achronim, that a Korban Tzibur like Musaf is a Korban that is referring to the Tzibur as a Tzibur, and it's not considered partners Korban. Okay, that was our assumption. Of course, that was the sine qua non, that a Korban Tzibur like Tamid and Musaf is not a partner's Korban. It is referring to the abstract entity of Klal Yisrael. That makes a lot of sense. I just want to show you that Rabbi Akiva Eiger, and also Rashi in some place, but here Rabbi Akiva Eiger understood it differently. Look at that. Rabbi Akiva Eiger has a certain parenthetical remark that is fascinating. Look at what Rabbi Akiva Eiger is saying in one of his shuvas. The L'chora Nira, it seems that Nashim Pturat Mitfilat Musaf. When the Nashim Lo Hayu Shoklot, they wouldn't bring the Shkalim. They don't have a portion in Korbanot Tzibur. Rabbi Akiva Eiger is saying something amazing. I gave a shir 10 years ago or 9 years ago with a little provocative title. I wanted to attract people, as a rabbi, to attract people to come to my afternoon Shabbat class. So the title was the following. That was about 9 years ago. What is the source for the minhag that ladies are skipping Musaf and are creating the Kiddush when there's a Simcha? They're ditching from Musaf and they're they're preparing the Kiddush for the end of the davening. So of course, the answer was this Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Rabbi Akiva Eiger claims that women are exempt from Musaf, from the davening of Musaf. And why? He says the following. Whereas Korban Tamid, whereas Shachris is not only corresponding, the source of the chiyuv of Shachris is not only because it's correlating to the Korban Tamid Shel Shachar. It has also because Keneged Avot, Avram Avinu established Shachris. It's not only because of the link of Shachris to Korban Tamid. However, Musaf has a special category. Tfilas Musaf is in a much stronger sense than the Shalma Parim Sfatenu. It stands for the Korban. Musaf stands directly for the Korban. Therefore, Rabbi Akiva Eiger claimed that the Tfilat Musaf, the davening of Musaf, stands directly for the Korban. Therefore, says Rabbi Akiva Eiger, who is chayav in Korban Musaf? Only the ones that are obligated to bring machzis hashekel. However, ladies, and also some achronim add in the opinion of Rabbi Akiva Eiger, there are some opinions, it's a machlokas, but there is some opinions that anyone who is, let's say, 15 years old, meaning even though he's chayav b'mitzvot, but he's less than 20, there is an opinion that people that are less than 20 are also exempt from machzis hashekel. So women, and according to some opinion, people who are Gdolim, but there are less than 20, they are exempt from Musaf, claims Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Why? Because Musaf is only, Filat Musaf is only corresponding to the Korban. And since they didn't have a portion in that Korban because they didn't bring Matzis HaShekel. And the Musaf was brought from Matzis HaShekel, from Trumas Alishka. So women are exempt from Musaf. That's what Rabbi Akiva Eiger claims. Now, of course, a lot of Achronim, Rav Soloveitchik, and as we'll see before Rav Soloveitchik, the Avnei Nezer, totally dismissed this opinion of Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Because Rabbi Akiva Eiger makes a link between the ones who are donating the money for the Matzis HaShekel and the ones that the Korban is referring to. Now that link is very questionable. It's two separate things. Indeed, some people are obligated to bring Matzis HaShekel, and some people are exempt from it. Then that money that was collected is serving to Korbanot Tzibur. The Tzibur as a Tzibur. Women are included in Tzibur. A 15-year-old boy is a part of a Tzibur, even though he didn't give the money. But now with that money, you're buying a Korban. It's not a Korban Shutafin. It's not a partner's Korban, that meaning that is really referring only to the ones that donated the money. This is considered now the money of the public, of Klal Yisrael. And therefore you have a Tamid Shel Shachar and Musaf that are referring to Klal Yisrael, men and women. Could one even think? And Rabbi Akiva Eiger, that's what seems the logical conclusion. But it's frightening to say that women are not also being represented in the Tamid Shel Shachar and Tamid Shel Bein Arbaim. Doesn't make sense at all. It's a Korban of Klal Yisrael. It doesn't matter who donated to it or who was obligated to donate it to it. This is not, again, it's not a Korban Shutafin that has a direct link between the one who paid and who the Korban refers to. It's a Korban of the abstract entity of Klal Yisrael and it doesn't matter who is obligated to donate to the money that this Korban is bought from. Let's see the Avnei Nezer. The Avnei Nezer says, this distinction between Tzibur LaShutafin, the distinction between the public as an abstract entity and partners, is, according to my humble eyes, clear. Harei meforash ze achiluk. The betzibur, that in public, ein nikra shem kol echad ve'echad ala korban. It's not that each one who donated, his name is on that offering. Rak al tzibur bechlal. It is just the title, the stamp on that korban is not many individuals, as happens in korban shutafin. Let's say 5 people bought together a korban. The name of each one of them is really, this korban is on his name. But he says, as opposed to that, on the korban tzibur, you have just tzibur. And therefore, ein kol echad vechad somech ala korban. Okay. Now he talks about another din. There is the din of smicha, right? Part of the process of korban and atonement is that you're doing smicha, you're putting your hands on the korban. Now he says there is no smicha on tamid and on musaf because who can do the smicha? It's just the abstract entity of Klal Yisrael. Each one has a portion in that korban tzibur, but it doesn't mean that each one has on its own a portion that is called minchat kohen. Let's say he's part of the public. Here, let's look at that. There, Yitzchak. So I just want to do a little pause. I said that I proved from the Rambam that the public bull is qualitatively different than Musaf. A public bull, there is a separate campaign, the Rambam says, alluding to the fact that I really see a public bull not just as a Korban Tzibur, but that each individual has a direct link to it. As opposed to that, I said Musaf and Tamid, it's just an abstract entity. It's a Korban Tzibur, not a Korban Shutafim, not a partners. Now, of course, the one who agrees with us is the Avnei Nezer that we've just seen. Rabbi Akiva Eiger, he disagrees. Rabbi Akiva Eiger claims that even Hamad Shel Shachar and Korban Musaf are really, in some sense, Korban Shutafim, partners, and therefore women that are not paying Machzis HaShekel are not included in that Korban. Let's see here, to conclude the point regarding women in Musaf, let's see the Ber Yitzchak. Bikar Masha Katav HaGaon Anal, meaning Rabbi Akiva Eiger, the Nashim Pturot Mitfilat Musaf, because they're not giving the Shkalim, Lo Nehir Ali. I disagree with it. Because if so, then I'm stuck with the Gemarah in Menachos. Rabbi Yehuda made a testament that every Kohen that is bringing Machzis HaShekel, he's not sinning, because in terms of the straight line of the din, Kohanim and Leviim and people who are less than 20 are exempt from Shkalim. So now he says rhetorically, Atu Kohanim veLeviim uktanim pchutim mibenim yipatrim mimusaf. You want to say that every Kohen, since in principle the Kohanim don't have to are exempt from bringing Machzis HaShekel. So does Rabbi Akiva Eiger really think that all the Kohanim and the Leviim are exempt from Tfilas Musaf? Therefore, we see here, as we've said, as the Avnei Nezer says, as the Rav Soloveitchik says, as opposed to Rabbi Akiva Eiger, that it has nothing to do with the Tfilat Musaf, and the Chiyuv in Tfilat Musaf has nothing to do with the question whether you're chayav to bring Machzis HaShekel or not. It is not Korban HaShutafin. It doesn't have a direct link to those who donated the money. There is some people who are obligated to donate the money, but then that money is serving to Korbanot of the abstract entity of Klal Yisrael. This is the truth regarding Musaf and Tamid. This is not true regarding what? Regarding the public bull, because the public bull has a separate, distinct campaign, which really could be an indicator to the fact that there is a direct link between each person who gave money to the public bull and the Korban. Therefore, that bull could exempt him from individual chatas, because that was really, in a sense, his individual chatas. Now let's see the second proof of Rav Lichtenstein, a proof that was already mentioned by the Avnei Nezer. Let's read the Gemarah in Menachos. Kol korbanot hatzibur ein behem smicha. Yeah, remember the Avnei Nezer mentioned that. Tamid shel shachar, the Tmidin and the Musafim, there is no smicha. Yeah, putting the hand on the, yeah. Chutz min apara ba'al mitzvot, al kol mitzvot, v'sa'ir mishtaleach. Rabbi Shimon omer, av seir avodas kochavim. Look at that. The Mishnah here says, there is no din of smicha on public offerings, korban tzibur. Why is that? The Avnei Nezer, we read it, the Avnei Nezer explained, because there is no one that will do the smicha. It's the abstract entity of Klal Yisrael that this korban is referring to. And we know that the owner, the one that the korban is brought on his name, he is the one that needs to do the smicha. Here, it's just the public, the abstract entity of the public. However, it's written here explicitly that para ba'al kol mitzvot, meaning our case, the public bull, here there is a smicha. Oh, why is there a smicha? Again, the same opinion. Since there is a direct link to every individual regarding the public bull, and it brings a specific atonement to every individual, Therefore, you need to do smicha. Probably one of the Sanhedrin or someone as a representative does the smicha, meaning there is, since there is a link between each individual and that korban, it's not just the abstract entity of a public, of the tzibur. Therefore, there is a din of smicha as opposed to, we saw two differences. We saw two differences between public offering, korban tzibur, and para elim davar shel tzibur. One was, it's a separate campaign. Second was smicha. These two differences, claims Rav Lichtenstein, could hint to a certain understanding of Reb Chaim that actually that individual korban, that public korban, actually served also as an individual korban for each one of the individuals. Why is also Sa'ir HaMishtaleach, yeah, the scapegoat, yeah, the goat that we're sending away in Yom Kippur once a year. Why is he requiring smicha? Why aren't we saying it's a korban tzibur? So here you could see that since it comes, Rav Lichtenstein offers the explanation that perhaps since the purpose of that scapegoat is to give atonement to all the sins of Am Yisrael, so perhaps again there is a direct link between the korban and every individual. Here we want a link between every individual and that korban. Okay. Alternatively, you could say that it's a special separate din. That seems even more plausible. The Brisker Rab says that we have a din of vidui. Here there is a very, very, it's a special, distinct, unique din regarding that scapegoat, that we want to attach all the sins to that scapegoat. In order to put all the sins on that scapegoat, you need to do smicha, and while doing smicha, you do the vidui. Okay, you're doing a vidui on it. Okay, so that could be the exception. Why Sa'ir Avodat Kochavim? Okay, here, just like we've seen, there's also a separate campaign, perhaps regarding Avodah Zarah. Again, there should be a link to each individual. Okay, I think that we're done for that. So we concluded that aspect of the machloket. What we'll do next week, we'll continue with the source sheet. Next week, we will analyze the question whether I could define a person, an individual, or who follows a false ruling of Beit Din. What makes more sense to define him, a shogeg or an anus? Okay, this will be the topic of our next week's class.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.